Hello and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a new weekly podcast shining a spotlight on Australian fiction. My name is Claudine Tinellis. As a writer and avid reader, I love chatting about books. And in this podcast, I'll chat to authors, publishers and readers, giving you, dear listener, insight into what's hot on the Australian fiction scene. So if you're looking for your next book recommendation or just want to know more about Aussie fiction writers, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy. Regular listeners to the podcast will know that this city girl loves a good rural fiction novel. Books from authors like Rachel Johns, Maya Linnell and Leonie Kelsall, Fiona Palmer and Kerry McGuinness, amongst many others that have found a welcome home on my shelves in recent years. And so it was with great delight that I discovered the work of my next guest author. Fleur McDonald is a veteran rural fiction writer. She's lived and worked on farms for most of her life and currently co-owns an 8,000-acre property in regional WA. And with 18 novels under her belt now and over 650,000 books sold, Fleur is well recognised as a leader in this genre, having well and truly earned her title as the voice of the Outback. Fleur's new book, Deception Creek, published by Allen Unwin, is due to be released in November. A rich, suspenseful story about a small town with many secrets and sudden divided loyalties. A terrific read, I must say. So it is with much delight that I welcome Fleur to the podcast today. Hi, Fleur.
Hello, a veteran. That makes me sound like I've got grey hair.
With 18 novels, my goodness. You know, Johnny come lately, that's for sure.
I know. I've been in the industry for a little while now.
So I wanted to say congratulations on what is now the impending release of your 18th novel. Probably by the time people are listening to this, it will well and truly be on the shelves. You've obviously been doing this for a long time now. Do you ever tire of seeing your books find their wings and fly out into the world?
No, I don't think that that's possible. With every book comes challenges when you're writing it, whether they're personal or whether it's a hard book to write or whatever. So I think by the time you actually hold it in your hand, it's always I don't know. I always get a bit teary. It's just such a relief to see it there and to know that it's actually done and dusted and it's ready to go out there into the world.
Fantastic. So Fleur, did you always know that you wanted to be a writer, or was this more of an accidental career path for you?
I think it was an accidental career path, something that I sort of fell into. The books that I were reading, the authors were, people like Enid Blyton and a lot of those types of books. And so the authors were dead. Never really thought it was a great career choice. Never gave a lot of thought to the authors behind the book, which, considering the social media side of things that we deal with now is crazy, because so many people know of the authors, or at least have seen the authors around on social media. So I think it's very clear to say that, or very fair to say, that I fell into it. I was farming. I always wanted to be a farmer. Toyed with the idea of being a rural journalist for a little while, and I still would have really liked to have done that, and I still wouldn't mind having a go at something like that. But yeah, I think I'm pretty stuck. Stuck's not the right word, but do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm happy where I am doing what I do.
I think it's fair to say that you write about strong women who live and work on the land. Do you think that women are the unsung heroes of rural living? Is it important for you to spotlight that more and more women have leading roles on family farms?
Not just family farms, on any farming or agricultural part of the agricultural industry these days. Certainly, women were very invisible when I started working on farms. Not necessarily when I started writing. We were beginning to see women come out from behind the wall, so to speak. And I think being able to celebrate women is a really important part of what I do. Yeah. And I see now that we're a lot more visible. Heaps of people out there, but to celebrate them and to have us recognised and that type of thing is really, really important.
Okay, so turning our attention to Deception Creek now, tell me where the inspiration for this story came from.
It's hard. Sometimes I just have ideas jump into my mind. I read an article about some ex-criminals that were having trouble fitting back into the community, and I thought that would be really interesting to play with. Emma's journey through her divorce and her loneliness and trying to go back into the dating scene and all that sort of stuff. I suppose that's sort of been something that I've got knowledge of. I've been divorced for 8 years now, and dabbled never dabbled with online dating, but certainly dabbled in the market. So I guess I had some fairly good knowledge of that I thought that I could share with people. And how it's quite frightening for older women to be doing that type of thing again.
Yeah, indeed. So small towns and long memories, I think, is a phrase that comes to mind when I think about this novel, and something that a couple of your characters say a few times throughout the narrative. Tell me about that and how that influenced this story in particular, or how it colours your writing in general.
Small towns have incredibly long memories. And the funny thing about that is generations, or the tiniest thing. And to use an example, I could tell the story of a family that had a boundary fence in a wrong spot at one stage, and it caused a massive falling out between these two families. But it continued on for 3 generations. And it's these tiny little things that will see people murdered, even to some little things really can end up growing into big things. And I guess that's what's happened in Deception Creek. And to be able to show the highlights, I suppose, of small country towns, not just in the bad things, but all parts of it. I love writing about rural towns because that's where I live and that's what I love, and how they work. I think to make a book authentic, it's really important to write about things that you have a deep understanding of, because that does make them authentic and page turners. It's those small little details I find that actually make scenes lift off the page and the readers to be able to see it in their minds.
For the benefit of those people who haven't had the pleasure of reading your book as I have, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the story.
Yes, Joel is an ex-criminal who has just been let out of jail. He is originally from Barker, and he's gone home. He's gone home because that's where he feels safe. That's where he has a house. His parents are both dead and they've died while he's in jail, and they've left him their house there. So he's got somewhere to go. And look, criminals find it very, very difficult to go to merge back into communities and not be looked upon as the lower end of society, and perhaps they haven't got any money, or they find it hard to get a job because they have that lack of trust. People have that lack of trust about them. So he's gone back into a very small country town that has very strong points of view about him and the incident that put him in jail, or partly put him in jail. And some of them are very pleased to see him back and some of them aren't. And in amongst all of this, Emma, who is a newly divorced farmer.
Yeah, fascinating story. And so you mentioned Dave just briefly there. So we're talking about Detective Dave Burrows, and he's a wonderful character, but I understand that he's got his own series of novels and makes an appearance in your other novels, including this one. So I wanted to ask you, what is it about Dave, do you think, that makes him such a likeable and evidently popular character?
Yeah, so Dave's been with me since my first novel, Red Dust, and if I'd known that he was going to grow into such a popular character, I may well have changed his name, because there is a real Detective Dave.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he's a mate of mine, but he's not this Dave. I think fictional Dave is very he's just flawed, he's a hothead and he's reactive, and he's certainly in his younger years, and I think all of his experiences, he goes through some pretty traumatic experiences in his younger years, and I think that they have moulded him into a very compassionate man, but also still a man's man. Yeah, he's perfect but flawed, and I've loved creating that, because you can make him who you want him to be, and he just seems to resonate with so many people. I have told all of the readers that I have dibs on him when he's ever in real life. If fictional Dave was real, I would have married him years ago. I wrote a blog about that a while back.
That's hilarious. Okay, so I think we see a fairly mellow Dave in this story. He's in this wonderful relationship with a wonderful woman, and he's got a trusty sidekick in Jack Higgins. He's a fairly mellow guy, but he's also a guy that I think it's fair to say that the town of Barker trusts.
Yes, absolutely. He's been there a while. He's been in Barker for a while. I think he's probably been there 5 or 6 years, I think. And everyone has learnt to trust him, because he has always held Barker's best interests at heart. Yeah, he genuinely cares for the people that are there. If you looked back at how he came into Barker, that also paved the way for the town to trust him straight away. And that's in a different story. That was in Emerald Springs.
This book has quite a serious undertone, I would say, dealing as it does with some heavy themes like domestic violence and sexual assault, just to name a couple. Now, without giving away any spoilers, I was only talking about domestic violence in the context of small towns recently on this podcast and the protection afforded to many male perpetrators by their so-called good standing in the community. Was this something that you consciously wanted to explore in this book, and why?
Okay, so I was a victim of domestic violence for quite some time. And I believe, I guess what I like to show with domestic violence is that it's not physical, doesn't always have to be physical. The TV ads show that, a woman cowering in the corner with a guy standing over the top, with a frying pan or something. And that's just not always how it is. The yelling and the mind games and everything else. I really wanted to highlight that. I also wanted to highlight that men are victims as well. And yes, they can be protected in the community, but women are protected as well. So I think it's really important that we look at it from both sides. And I have explored the woman's side of domestic violence in other books that I've done. It's just nice to remind people that there is what domestic violence can be and that there is help out there.
Thanks for sharing that. So I also wanted to ask you about DV Assist. Why did you start this organisation and what can people do if they would like to help?
Yep. So, well, obviously, my experiences was the call behind DV Assist. It started off as breaking the silence for that exact reason, that we were to break the silence about the fact that it wasn't just physical. And as it grew, and I got funding from the federal government for it, it took on a whole new persona, I suppose. It went from an organisation that was started by some chick in the country for country people to a reasonably corporate organisation, which it had to be. So I knew that we needed counselling services for men, women and children in rural areas. It's pretty hard sometimes to drive down the street and have your car parked in front of, the counselling services or a doctor's surgery, for 2 or 3 times in a week. People see these things and they notice in rural areas. So I wanted to make it a lot easier for people to access it from the safety of their own homes when they were safe. And so that was where the telephone counselling comes into it. And there's also an online chat room that is on the website now as well. And also to collate all the services within a town to that one website. So the dvassist.org.au website is really comprehensive. It's got services for a lot of the rural towns in WA up there. It's got safety plans. It's got quizzes to see whether or not you are in a domestic violence situation. There's a lot of stuff on there. It's probably the most comprehensive website there is in Australia. And it's a very unique organisation in the way that it is just for rural people. And at the moment, we're only taking phone calls and counselling services from people in WA, but hopefully the intent was in time it would go nationwide. And there's a real call for it, which breaks my heart, but I guess that's why I knew that it was needed. I've talked to enough people around the place to know that it was needed.
And so if people wanted to help, they could go onto your website or onto the DV Assist website and make a donation if they wanted to?
Absolutely, yeah. We are always looking for donations. Organisations like this always need money to keep helping people. And the other thing that's on there that might be helpful to some people is for people that have loved ones that are experiencing domestic violence. It's always hard to know what to do because often outside of the relationship you can see it so clearly, but the person inside can't because it's normal to them.
Yeah. One of the other interesting and quite topical issues you explore in this novel is scammers blackmailing women through dating apps.
My biggest fear.
We've seen a general increase in online scams during the pandemic, I would have to say. Every other day I get a call with a robotic voice telling me I owe money to the tax office or a warrant has been issued for my arrest. Terrible criminal that I am.
I was going to say, you're such a naughty girl.
And the sad thing is, this is really the sad thing, is that people are falling for these scams every single day. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, in relation to the blackmail and the scamming, do you think this kind of thing has hit rural communities hard in recent times?
Oh, look, I think so. Like my phone even last night, I think it was at 2:30 in the morning, my phone goes off with a text message and it tells me I've got a voicemail that I have to listen to. And of course, if a text message comes through to an elderly person at that time of the night, they're going to be frightened and they're going to think, what is wrong. And I guess the other thing I wanted to explore with that is that, really intelligent people can be caught with these scams. It just takes 2 seconds. I know of 4 people that I've spoken to in the last week that have had their credit cards hacked. So yeah, it's certainly hitting rural areas the same way as what it does in the city. I don't think they even know where they're calling, do they? They're just finding a phone number and going, oh, let's have a crack at that.
I think Detective Dave Burrows and his offsider Jack Higgins did a remarkable job in helping Jackie with her problem in this novel. But it was clear that they were out of their depth on this one, weren't they?
Yeah, and a lot of these small country coppers don't have the experience, and that not just small country coppers either. In the cities, that's why we have squads of things. There's major crime, there's major crash, crimes against children, computer crimes. So they've all got squads where they've got their expertise, and the computer crime squad is, they sit in a dungeon and look at computer screens all day trying to work out how to hack things, and your normal copper that's on the street that's arresting drunk drivers or petty burglars don't see this type of thing, so they need their experts. So it's not that they were out of their depth, but it's not that they couldn't, they just needed the squads that had the expertise.
Indeed. So, okay, on that point, did you have to do any particular research to bring this aspect of the story to the page?
So the real Detective Dave is my research. He is my go-to fella for any of this, and if he doesn't know, he finds out for me. So he certainly spoke to some people in computer crimes, and we got information on that. Dave and I catch up. I had lunch with him yesterday. We catch up probably once every 6 or 8 weeks and have lunch and have a beer and just chat about investigation techniques. And if he doesn't know something, he'll find out for me. So I'm very lucky to have an encyclopedia, walking, talking encyclopedia on tap.
Indeed, he sounds like a wonderful resource for a writer.
He is.
Okay, so Emma was an interesting character, and Deception Creek was her family farm. She was running it after the death of her parents. Now, she was an agronomist, and I'd not heard of this profession before. Can you tell me more about that?
So an agronomist, yeah. So they're people that are crop doctors or pasture doctors. Anything to do with what's growing. So whether it's barley or canola or whatever. So they will go out and they'll have a look at your pasture or your crop and work out what they can test your soil, so they'll do soil tests and work out what fertilizers you need. So it's farming is actually a science, and to make really good decisions and economical decisions, you need to know what you're working with. We need to know what's in the soil or what's not. No point in putting on nitrogen when it needs sulfate of potash or something like that. It's one of those things that we need to have informed decisions or informed information. So Emma was working for a stock firm where she went and she had lots and lots of clients, and she would get around and she would help with all the advice that they needed. But there was an incident there at the beginning of the book that brought her back home to Deception Creek, and she can still put her agro skills to work on her own place, but she's not servicing others anymore.
What would you like most for readers to take away from this lovely book?
Well, Lovely Book's an interesting description of it because it is dark. There are some fairly dark things in there. So there's probably going to be a few pages where people might feel a bit yucky when they're reading it, but it's all for the greater good. And I guess I would like people to take away that, or entertainment to begin with, that they've enjoyed the story, that they've spent a bit of time with Dave and Jack and Zara and Kim. And people seem to like to do that, as I do when I'm writing. And I guess that just there's not really any great message in there, just entertainment and hope, I suppose. Hope that things can change when life throws curveballs at you.
In addition to the 18 novels that you've written, you also have two children's books to your name, and you offer services to help other writers in their writing journey. I wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, the kids' books, they were published a few years ago now by a small publisher called New Frontier Press, and I loved writing them. I don't think I'll write anymore because I wrote them when the kids were small, and then you sometimes forget what kids like. They're still around, and I enjoy bringing them out occasionally. And the writing services, well, the first part of that is Between the Pages, which is I think it's a 16-day course. I've just forgotten exactly, 16-day course that I wrote a year or so ago that turns up in your inbox through an email every morning. And that's sort of help you create and carve out time to write every day. And there's also a heap of meditations with that. I've put together meditations. I find meditating before I write really, really helpful. It really does clear your mind. So there's a daily meditation to do with them that one of my friends put together for me, Bev. She's a hypnotherapist, and so we work together with the content of the emails for each day, so they're pertinent to each day's lesson. And then the other one is the manuscript assessment, and that's just if someone's got a manuscript they want looked at, I'm more than happy to do that. I think you send me the first 3 chapters or something like that, and we'll have a look, and if I can help in any way and offer any critique, then I will. And if I think it is an amazing book, which I have done with a couple of them, my publisher has agreed to read those first 20 pages and just offer some feedback or see if she wants to read more.
Well, that's wonderful. Great support to the Australian writing community. Fantastic. I have a lot of writers that listen to this podcast, Fleur, and I often ask authors if they had their top 3 tips that they might be willing to share.
It's funny because as a full-time writer, what we need to do is probably different to the people that are still writing, trying to get published. And I would say that you need to read lots. In saying that, I don't read anywhere near as much as what I should. So that's one of those do as I say, not as I do type things. And I think writing every day is really important. Again, that's a do as I say, not as I do thing, because there are days that I don't get to write either. But I think journal writing is incredibly important. I don't know that too many people bring this up, but to empty your head of all the day-to-day things just by writing it down first thing in the morning. I find when I get up, I write my journal, but at the same time, when I'm writing my journal, I think of all these things that I have to do. So then I can write a list of what I have to do that day or what I've got to do tomorrow. Don't forget to make that phone call. And then I don't have to remember anything because it's already there. And then my mind is open to anything creative. And that's really, really important to me.
Thanks for that. If listeners wanted to learn more about you and your books, where can they do that?
On Facebook. where would we be without Facebook?
I know.
So just pop my name, Fleur McDonald, into the search engine, and same with Insta and Twitter. And I have a website, fleurmcdonald.com. I'm reasonably easy to find.
So Deception Creek was the first of your novels that I've read, but I know it won't be the last. Highly recommended for fans of rural fiction. Thank you so much for joining me on Talking Aussie Books today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or drop me a line via my Instagram at Claudine Tinellis or on my webpage, claudinetинellis.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy reading.